Have you ever wondered why hungry Ice Age humans would willingly give away their last piece of food to a wolf? Before we begin, let me know in the comments. Would you have shared your last meal with a wild wolf if your family's survival depended on it? And if you enjoy fascinating stories about human evolution, ancient history, and the mysteries of our prehistoric ancestors, be sure to subscribe and join our growing community. We explore the incredible moments that shaped humanity's journey through time. Imagine waking up 20,000 years ago during one of the coldest periods in human history. The wind moves across a frozen landscape. Snow covers the ground. Food has become increasingly difficult to find, and every hunting trip feels more uncertain than the last. Around your campfire, families sit quietly beneath animal hide shelters, carefully sharing what little food remains. Children are hungry. The elderly are growing weaker. Winter seems endless. In a world like this, every scrap of meat matters. Every bite could mean another day of survival. And yet tonight, something unexpected is about to happen. Beyond the glow of the fire, a pair of eyes watches from the darkness. A wolf, not a loyal dog, not a beloved companion, just a wild animal standing at the edge of the night. Most people would chase it away. Some would fear it. Others might see it as competition for the tribe's already limited food. But instead of driving the wolf off, someone does something remarkable. A small piece of precious meat is tossed toward the waiting animal. At first, it seems like a foolish decision. Why feed a predator when your own people are struggling to survive? But what if that simple act of kindness helped create one of the most important partnerships in human history? Tonight, we'll journey back to the Ice Age and explore how a hungry tribe, a watchful wolf, and a shared meal may have changed the future of both species forever. So settle in, relax, and let's travel back to a world where one simple decision may have helped shape the destiny of humanity itself. You wake before sunrise. The cold arrives before your eyes fully open. It presses through the layers of animal fur covering your body. It fills the air inside the shelter. It settles into your hands, your feet, and your bones. Outside, the Ice Age world remains locked in darkness. The fire that burned through the night has weakened. Only a few glowing embers remain beneath a layer of gray ash. For a moment, you lie still and listen. The wind is howling again. Another storm is moving across the frozen landscape. The sound is familiar. It has become one of the constant companions of your life. Wind, snow, cold, hunger, especially hunger. 20,000 years ago, survival is never guaranteed. Every morning begins with the same question. Will there be enough food today? You rise from your sleeping place and step outside. The valley stretches before you beneath a pale winter sky. Snow covers the ground in every direction. The rivers are frozen. The grasslands that once supported great herds now seem empty. Even the tracks of animals have become harder to find. Nearby, several hunters are already preparing for another journey. They do not speak much. There is little to say. Everyone understands the situation. Food is disappearing. For many weeks, the hunting parties have returned with less and less meat. Sometimes they spend entire days tracking animals across the frozen plains, only to come back empty-handed. The great reindeer herds that once passed near the camp have moved farther south. Their migration routes have changed. No one knows exactly why. Perhaps the snow has become too deep. Perhaps new grasslands have appeared elsewhere. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. The tribe is running out of food. You watch the hunters disappear into the distance, tiny figures crossing a vast white world. Their success or failure may determine who survives the coming weeks. Around the camp, families begin another difficult day. Children sit close to the fire. Their faces are thinner than they were a few moons ago. Many ask when the hunters will return. Many ask whether there will be meat tonight. Their parents offer hopeful answers. But hope cannot fill an empty stomach. The elders suffer as well. The oldest members of the tribe move more slowly now. Their bodies struggle against the cold. Their strength fades a little more with each passing week. Some spend long hours resting near the fire, conserving what energy remains. Everyone notices. No one speaks about it. Yet everyone understands. Winter is winning. The cold takes its toll on the young. It takes its toll on the old. And sometimes it takes more than strength. It takes lives. Not every child survives an Ice Age winter. That is one of the harsh truths of your world. Some seasons are simply too long. Some storms last too many days. Some hunting trips fail too many times. When food becomes scarce, the smallest members of the tribe often suffer first. The memory of those losses stays with everyone. It lingers in quiet conversations. It lingers in the empty spaces around the fire. It lingers in the determination of every hunter who leaves camp each morning. A sudden gust of wind sweeps through the valley. Snow swirls across the ground. Dark clouds gather on the horizon. Another storm is coming. You can feel it. The hunters know it too. Storms are dangerous, not only because of the cold. Storms hide tracks. Storms scatter animals. Storms make successful hunting even more difficult. And every unsuccessful hunt pushes the tribe closer to disaster. As evening approaches, the hunting party finally returns. The entire camp watches. Children stand. Parents look toward the horizon. The elders slowly lift their heads. Everyone searches for signs of success. Did they find the reindeer? Did they bring back enough food? The answer arrives quickly. Not much. A small amount of meat. Far less than anyone hoped for. The food is divided carefully. Every portion is measured. Every scrap matters. Nothing is wasted. Not the meat, not the fat, not the marrow inside the bones. In the Ice Age, every bite has value. Every bite represents another day of life. That night, as darkness settles across the frozen valley once again, you sit beside the fire and stare into the flames. The wind continues to howl beyond the camp. Snow drifts across the plains. The tribe eats quietly. No one takes more than their share. No one knows how many difficult weeks still lie ahead. Only one thing feels certain. The world is changing. Food is becoming harder to find. Winter is becoming harder to endure. And somewhere beyond the reach of the firelight, other hungry creatures are facing the very same struggle. Watching. Waiting. Searching for their next meal. Part 1. The world is running out of food. You wake before sunrise. The cold arrives before your eyes fully open. It presses through the layers of animal fur, covering your body. It fills the air inside the shelter. It settles into your hands, your feet, and your bones. Outside, the Ice Age world remains locked in darkness. The fire that burned through the night has weakened. Only a few glowing embers remain beneath a layer of gray ash. For a moment, you lie still and listen. The wind is howling again. Another storm is moving across the frozen landscape. The sound is familiar. It has become one of the constant companions of your life. Wind, snow, cold, hunger, especially hunger. 20,000 years ago, survival is never guaranteed. Every morning begins with the same question. Will there be enough food today? You rise from your sleeping place and step outside. The valley stretches before you beneath a pale winter sky. Snow covers the ground in every direction. The rivers are frozen. The grasslands that once supported great herds now seem empty. Even the tracks of animals, have become harder to find. Nearby, several hunters are already preparing for another journey. They do not speak much. There is little to say. Everyone understands the situation. Food is disappearing. For many weeks, the hunting parties have returned with less and less meat. Sometimes they spend entire days tracking animals across the frozen plains, only to come back empty-handed. The great reindeer herds that once passed near the camp have moved farther south. Their migration routes have changed. No one knows exactly why. Perhaps the snow has become too deep. Perhaps new grasslands have appeared elsewhere. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. The tribe is running out of food. You watch the hunters disappear into the distance, tiny figures crossing a vast white world. Their success or failure may determine who survives the coming weeks. Around the camp, families begin another difficult day. Children sit close to the fire. Their faces are thinner than they were a few moons ago. Many ask when the hunters will return. Many ask whether there will be meat tonight. Their parents offer hopeful answers. But hope cannot fill an empty stomach. The elders suffer as well. The oldest members of the tribe move more slowly now. Their bodies struggle against the cold. Their strength fades a little more with each passing week. Some spend long hours resting near the fire, conserving what energy remains. Everyone notices. No one speaks about it. Yet everyone understands. Winter is winning. The cold takes its toll on the young. It takes its toll on the old. And sometimes it takes more than strength. It takes lives. Not every child survives an Ice Age winter. That is one of the harsh truths of your world. Some seasons are simply too long. Some storms last too many days. Some hunting trips fail too many times. When food becomes scarce, the smallest members of the tribe often suffer first. The memory of those losses stays with everyone. It lingers in quiet conversations. It lingers in the empty spaces around the fire. It lingers in the determination of every hunter who leaves camp each morning. A sudden gust of wind sweeps through the valley. Snow swirls across the ground. Dark clouds gather on the horizon. Another storm is coming. You can feel it. The hunters know it too. Storms are dangerous, not only because of the cold. Storms hide tracks. Storms scatter animals. Storms make successful hunting even more difficult. And every unsuccessful hunt pushes the tribe closer to disaster. As evening approaches, the hunting party finally returns. The entire camp watches. Children stand. Parents look toward the horizon. The elders slowly lift their heads. Everyone searches for signs of success. Did they find the reindeer? Did they bring back enough food? The answer arrives quickly. Not much. A small amount of meat. Far less than anyone hoped for. The food is divided carefully. Every portion is measured. Every scrap matters. Nothing is wasted. Not the meat, not the fat, not the marrow inside the bones. In the Ice Age, every bite has value. Every bite represents another day of life. That night, as darkness settles across the frozen valley once again, you sit beside the fire and stare into the flames. The wind continues to howl beyond the camp. Snow drifts across the plains. The tribe eats quietly. No one takes more than their share. No one knows how many difficult weeks still lie ahead. Only one thing feels certain. The world is changing. Food is becoming harder to find. Winter is becoming harder to endure. And somewhere beyond the reach of the firelight, other hungry creatures are facing the very same struggle. Watching. Waiting. Searching for their next meal. Night arrives quickly during the Ice Age. One moment, the last traces of daylight linger above the frozen horizon. The next, darkness settles across the valley like a heavy blanket. The hunters have returned. The evening meal has been shared. The children sit close to the fire. The elders wrap themselves in thick animal furs. And once again, the tribe gathers around the one thing standing between life and the endless cold. The fire. The flames crackle softly. Golden light dances across faces, weathered by wind, snow, and years of survival. Beyond the firelight, however, the world becomes something else entirely. A place of uncertainty. A place where shapes disappear into shadows. A place where unseen creatures move through the darkness. You stare into the flames for a while, enjoying what little warmth they provide. Then something catches your attention. A movement, far beyond the edge of camp. At first it seems insignificant. Perhaps the wind, perhaps drifting snow, but then you notice it again. And this time you see them. Eyes. Two small points of light reflecting the glow of the fire. Watching. Silent. Still. You blink. The eyes remain. A few moments later, another pair appears. Then another. And another. Soon, several pairs of eyes are scattered across the darkness beyond the camp. The children notice them too. Some move closer to their parents. Others stare with fascination. The hunters quietly reach for their spears. No one panics. They already know what is out there. Wolves, the most familiar predators of the Ice Age. For countless generations, wolves and humans have shared the same world. Both hunt the same animals. Both follow the migrating herds. Both struggle against the same winters. Sometimes they compete. Sometimes they avoid one another. And occasionally they cross paths. Like tonight, the wolves remain outside the firelight, far enough away to stay safe, close enough to observe. They do not growl. They do not charge. They do not threaten the camp. Instead, they simply watch. Patiently, almost curiously. The wind shifts direction. Immediately, several wolves lift their heads. Their noses test the air. You understand what they smell. Meat. Not much. Only a few scraps remain from the evening meal. But during a difficult winter, even the scent of a small amount of food can travel far across the frozen landscape. The wolves have likely been following that scent for hours, perhaps longer. One of the younger hunters throws a small stick toward the darkness. The wolves step back, then stop. A few moments later, they return to their original positions, watching once again, waiting once again. It is strange. If they are afraid, why do they stay? If they are hungry, why do they not leave in search of easier food? Night after night, the same pattern continues. The wolves appear shortly after sunset. They remain beyond the edge of the firelight. They watch the camp, and they wait. Some members of the tribe dislike their presence. They see only danger, only sharp teeth hidden in the darkness. Others feel something different, something harder to explain. The wolves do not behave like predators preparing to attack. They behave like observers, like travelers studying another group of travelers, like hungry creatures trying to understand another species that has somehow managed to survive in the same frozen world. Several nights pass, then several more. The wolves continue returning, always watching, always waiting, always staying just beyond the reach of the fire. The children begin recognizing them. One wolf is larger than the others. Another limps slightly when it walks. A third has unusually pale fur that almost disappears against the snow. The animals are no longer anonymous shadows. They are becoming familiar. And familiarity has a way of changing how people see the world. One evening, as snow drifts gently across the valley, you notice something unusual. The wolves seem thinner than before. Their ribs are visible beneath their winter coats. Their movements appear slower, more cautious. The difficult winter is hurting them as well. The realization lingers in your thoughts. The tribe is hungry. The wolves are hungry. The reindeer have moved on. The storms continue. Everyone is struggling. For a moment, the distance between hunter and predator feels smaller than it once did. Both species are simply trying to survive. Both species are searching for food. Both species are enduring the same unforgiving season. The fire crackles. The wolves remain motionless. Their eyes reflect the flames like tiny stars scattered across the darkness. Watching, waiting, patient, as if hoping for something, as if believing that one night, somehow things might be different. And before long, they will be. Because one small act, one tiny scrap of food, one simple decision made beside an Ice Age campfire is about to begin changing everything. The winter continues. The storms continue. And so do the wolves. Night after night they appear beyond the firelight, watching, waiting, listening. At first, no one pays much attention to them. Wolves have always existed in this world. They roam the frozen plains. They follow the migrating herds. They hunt when they can. And they disappear when they must. There is nothing unusual about wolves, or so it seems. But as the days pass, several members of the tribe begin noticing something strange. These wolves are different. Most wolves avoid humans whenever possible. For generations, people have learned that wild wolves are cautious animals. The moment they smell humans, they leave. The moment they hear voices, they disappear into the darkness. The moment they see movement, they retreat. That is how wolves survive. Yet the wolves outside your camp behave differently. They do not run. They do not vanish. In fact, some seem to be moving closer. Not much, only a few steps at a time. A little closer one night, a little closer the next. Almost too slowly to notice. Almost. One evening, while adding wood to the fire, you glance toward the darkness. The pale-furred wolf is there again. But something has changed. It is closer than ever before, close enough for you to see its shape clearly, close enough to see its breath rising into the freezing air. The wolf sees you looking. For a moment, neither of you moves. Then, something unexpected happens. The animal simply sits down, calmly, quietly, as if your presence does not frighten it. The sight feels strange, almost unsettling. A wild wolf should be running, yet this one remains, watching, observing, learning. The tribe begins talking about it, mostly in whispers, mostly around the fire after sunset. Some hunters believe the wolves are becoming desperate from hunger. Others think they are simply growing bold. But a few people wonder if something else is happening, something no one fully understands. The children notice it first. Children often see things adults overlook. While the hunters focus on danger, the children focus on behavior. They begin recognizing individual wolves. The large gray male, the pale female, the young wolf with one torn ear. Each has its own habits, its own personality, its own place among the pack. And unlike ordinary wolves, these animals seem unusually curious. They spend long periods simply observing the camp, watching families gather, watching people work, watching children play, as though they are trying to understand the strange creatures who walk on two legs. One afternoon, something even more unusual happens. The hunters are preparing for another journey. People move through the camp gathering tools and supplies. Normally, such activity would frighten nearby predators. But not today. A young wolf stands on a distant ridge overlooking the valley. It watches everything: the voices, the movement, the smoke rising from the fire, yet it never runs away. The hunters notice. Several exchange uncertain glances. This is not normal behavior. Wild wolves are intelligent, very intelligent, but they are also cautious. Survival demands caution, especially during the Ice Age. Yet these wolves seem willing to accept risks that others would avoid. As winter drags on, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The same wolves return repeatedly. The same wolves stay nearby. The same wolves remain calm around human activity. Little by little, the distance between the two species continues to shrink. Not because anyone planned it, not because anyone intended it, but because curiosity is working in both directions. The humans are watching the wolves. The wolves are watching the humans. And both are discovering something unexpected. The other side may not be as frightening as they once believed. One particularly cold evening, snow falls softly across the valley. The campfire burns brighter than usual. Families gather close together. Outside the circle of light, the wolves appear once again. But tonight, one of them does something no wolf has done before. It lies down, not far from the camp, not inside the firelight, but close enough to feel some of its warmth. The hunters immediately notice. So do the elders. No one speaks. Everyone watches. The wolf rests its head upon its paws. Its eyes remain open, alert, yet peaceful. Minutes pass, then more minutes. The animal does not leave. It simply stays, as if it has decided that this place is safer than the darkness beyond. The realization spreads quietly through the camp. These are not ordinary wolves. Something is different about them. No one knows exactly what. No one can imagine where it might lead. But for the first time, some members of the tribe begin wondering whether these animals are more than distant predators. Perhaps they are becoming something else, something that has never existed before. And soon a small act by one curious child will bring the two worlds even closer together. A simple gesture, a tiny scrap of food. A moment so ordinary that nobody realizes they are witnessing the beginning of a story that will last thousands of years. The winter seems endless. Day after day, the frozen landscape remains unchanged. Snow covers the valleys. Ice grips the rivers. The wind sweeps across the open plains with a voice that never seems to grow tired. And yet, despite the cold, despite the hunger, despite the uncertainty hanging over every evening meal, life inside the camp continues. Children still play when they can. Parents still tell stories beside the fire. The hunters still leave each morning before sunrise. And every night, the wolves still return. By now, their presence has become almost expected. The tribe no longer reacts with alarm whenever glowing eyes appear beyond the firelight. The hunters remain cautious, of course. No one forgets that wolves are predators. No one forgets the sharp teeth hidden behind those watchful faces. Yet something has changed. The fear is no longer as strong as it once was. Curiosity has begun taking its place. The wolves seem content to watch, and the people have begun watching them in return. Among the wolves, one in particular attracts attention. It is younger than the others, smaller, leaner. Its winter coat is thick but uneven. Its movements are less confident than the older wolves. Sometimes it lingers behind the rest of the pack. Sometimes it sits alone. The children notice it immediately. Children often notice things adults ignore. To the hunters, it is simply another wolf. To the children, it is an individual, a familiar face among the shadows. Night after night, They pointed out to one another. There it is again. The young one. The small wolf. The one that always sits closest to the firelight. One evening, the wind is unusually calm. For the first time in many days, snow is not falling. The sky above the valley is clear. Thousands of stars shine overhead. The tribe has finished eating. There is not much food. There rarely is anymore. Every meal is carefully divided. Every scrap matters. Even the smallest pieces are valuable, especially now. A young child sits near the edge of the fire, perhaps 7 or 8 winters old, wrapped in heavy animal furs, quietly holding a bone from the evening meal. There is little meat left on it. Almost none. The adults pay little attention. They are busy discussing tomorrow's hunt, busy worrying about the weather, busy wondering whether the reindeer herds might finally return. The child, however, is looking elsewhere, toward the darkness, toward the wolves, more specifically, toward the young wolf. The animal is there, as always, watching, waiting. Its pale eyes reflect the firelight. For several moments, neither moves. Child and wolf, separated by only a short distance, separated by thousands of years of instinct. The child tilts their head. The wolf tilts its head as well. The gesture feels strangely familiar, almost playful. Then, without thinking much about it, the child does something unexpected. They toss the bone. Not far, just beyond the edge of the firelight. The bone lands softly on the snow. For a moment, nothing happens. Several adults glance over. A hunter frowns. An elder raises an eyebrow. The wolves immediately become alert. Every nose lifts into the air. Every pair of ears points forward. The scent of food is impossible to ignore. The young wolf hesitates. It looks toward the larger wolves, then back toward the bone, then toward the humans. The camp grows strangely quiet. Everyone watches. No one speaks. Slowly, cautiously, the young wolf takes a step forward. Then another. Its paws move silently across the snow. Closer. 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 The animal reaches the bone. It lowers its head. Sniffs. Pauses. Then, gently, picks it up. No growling. No snapping. No aggression. Just a hungry animal accepting a gift. The wolf steps back, chews carefully, then sits down once again. The entire exchange lasts less than a minute, yet something about it feels important. No one can explain why. The child smiles. The wolf remains calm, and the world continues turning. At first glance, it seems insignificant. After all, it is only a bone, only a single scrap of food, only one brief interaction during one cold night in the Ice Age. But history is often shaped by moments that seem small at the time, moments nobody records, moments nobody celebrates, moments that pass almost unnoticed. The following night, the wolves return again. The young wolf appears once more. This time it sits slightly closer. Not much closer. Just enough for people to notice. The night after that, it returns again, and again, and again. Gradually, the fear that once existed between the two species begins to soften. Not disappear, not completely, but soften. The child no longer sees only a predator. The wolf no longer sees only strange creatures around a fire. A tiny bridge has formed between two worlds, one built not from power, not from control, not from dominance, but from something far simpler. Trust. Very small trust. Fragile trust. The kind that can disappear as quickly as it appears. Yet it continues to grow. The adults notice it too. Some disapprove. Food is too precious to waste. Every scrap belongs to the tribe. Every scrap might be needed tomorrow. But others remain silent, because deep down they are curious as well. Curious about these unusual wolves. Curious about the young animal that never runs away. Curious about what might happen next. Meanwhile, the wolf continues returning, night after night, week after week, always watching, always waiting, always sitting near the edge of the firelight. And although nobody around that campfire can possibly know it, something extraordinary has already begun. Because the first step toward changing history was not a great hunt, not a battle, not a discovery. It was a single piece of food, a single act of kindness, shared between a hungry child and a hungry wolf. And before long, both species will begin learning just how valuable that small gesture truly was. The first bone should have been the end of the story. At least that's what most people would have expected. A hungry child throws away a scrap. A hungry wolf eats it. The night passes. Life continues. Nothing changes. But that isn't what happened. The wolf came back. And then it came back again. Soon, everyone in the camp began noticing the pattern. The wolves no longer appeared only occasionally. They arrived almost every evening, just after sunset, just as families gathered around the fire, just as the smell of cooking meat drifted into the cold night air. The wolves were always there, watching from beyond the firelight, waiting. Over time, something unusual happened. The people stopped reacting with surprise. The wolves became part of the landscape, like the wind, like the snow, like the stars overhead. They were simply there. Yet familiarity can be dangerous, especially in the Ice Age, because familiarity often makes people forget what something truly is. The wolves still had sharp teeth. They were still hunters, still predators, still capable of bringing down animals much larger than themselves. No one knew this better than the hunters. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, a heated discussion begins around the fire. The hunting party has returned with very little food. Again. The reindeer herds remain far away. The weather continues to worsen. Everyone is tired. Everyone is hungry. And hunger has a way of making small disagreements feel much larger. A hunter breaks the silence. We shouldn't be feeding them. Several heads nod immediately. The wolves are nearby tonight, closer than usual, watching, listening, waiting. The hunter points toward the darkness. Every scrap we give them is food our children could eat. No one argues with that, because it is true. Food is life. Food is survival. Nothing is more valuable. Another hunter speaks. They're predators. His voice is calm but firm. Maybe they're quiet now. Maybe they're cautious now. But they're still wolves. Again, several people agree. They have seen wolves hunt. They have seen what hungry wolves can do. Trusting predators feels foolish, dangerous, perhaps even reckless. For a while, no one responds. Only the sound of crackling fire fills the silence. Then one of the elders speaks. His voice is quieter, older, wiser. I know they're wolves. Everyone turns toward him. The elder studies the flames before continuing. But have you noticed something strange? The camp grows silent. The elder points toward the darkness, toward the wolves. They keep coming back. A few people shrug. Of course they come back. They're hungry. But the elder shakes his head. No. He looks directly at the hunters. They don't act like other wolves. Now everyone is listening. The elder has spent more winters alive than anyone else in the tribe. If he notices something unusual, people pay attention. He gestures toward the pale young wolf, the same one that first accepted the child's bone. That one could have left long ago. The wolf remains still, watching the fire, watching the people, watching the tribe. Yet it makes no attempt to approach the food, no attempt to steal, no attempt to threaten. The elder continues. Every night they sit there. Every night they watch. And every night they leave. No one answers, because it is true. Weeks have passed. Opportunities have existed. Yet the wolves have never attacked, never rushed into camp, never challenged the hunters. The tribe begins thinking about something they have never seriously considered before. What if these wolves are different? The idea feels strange, almost impossible. But once a question enters the mind, it becomes difficult to ignore. The discussion continues late into the evening. Gradually, the camp divides into two groups. The first group remains convinced the wolves are a threat. They believe the animals should be driven away. Immediately, before something goes wrong, before someone gets hurt, before curiosity becomes tragedy. The second group is less certain, not because they trust the wolves, not yet, but because they have noticed things, small things, the way the wolves observe rather than threaten, the way they remain calm near the camp, the way the young wolf seems especially interested in the people, particularly the children. Neither side can fully prove its argument, and that uncertainty makes the debate even more intense. Meanwhile, the wolves continue returning, unaware that they have become the center of every conversation, unaware that people are arguing about them long after sunset, unaware that the future of their relationship with humans may depend upon decisions being made around a single campfire. Several nights later, another storm arrives. The wind screams across the valley. Snow swirls through the darkness. Visibility drops. The world beyond the firelight disappears. Conditions like these are dangerous. For humans, for wolves, for everything. Most creatures seek shelter. Most creatures hide. Yet when the tribe looks beyond the camp that night, they see something unexpected. The wolves are still there, curled together against the storm, enduring the same cold, facing the same wind, surviving the same winter. For the first time, some members of the tribe begin seeing them differently, not simply as predators, not simply as rivals, but as fellow survivors, creatures struggling against the same unforgiving world. The realization is subtle, small, easy to miss, yet it changes something. The line separating the two species becomes slightly less clear. The distance becomes slightly smaller. The friendship remains dangerous. The risk remains real. No one knows where this path will lead. No one knows whether trust or disaster waits ahead. But one thing is becoming increasingly obvious. These are not ordinary wolves, and whatever is happening between them and the tribe has only just begun. For many weeks, the debate continued. Every evening, the wolves appeared beyond the firelight. Every evening, the tribe watched them, and every evening, the same question returned. Were the wolves becoming friends, or were they simply waiting for the perfect opportunity? No one knew. The hunters remained cautious. The elders remained thoughtful. The children remained fascinated, and the wolves kept returning. Night after night, as if something invisible was drawing them back to the camp. Then came the storm, the kind of storm people remembered for years, the kind that made even experienced hunters nervous. It arrived shortly before sunset. Dark clouds swallowed the sky. The wind strengthened until it roared across the frozen valley like a living thing. Snow began falling heavily. Within hours, the world beyond the camp disappeared. The familiar landscape vanished beneath blowing white curtains. The distant hills disappeared. The frozen river disappeared. Even the nearest trees became difficult to see. Everything beyond the fire seemed to dissolve into darkness and snow. The tribe gathered close together. Extra wood was placed on the fire. Additional animal hides were secured around the shelters. Everyone understood the danger. A storm like this could kill. Not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, relentlessly. A person lost in weather like this might never find their way home again. As darkness settled across the valley, the storm grew even worse. The wind screamed through the night. Snow piled against the shelters. The fire struggled to stay alive. Most people eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep. Tomorrow would be another difficult day, another difficult hunt, another difficult struggle for food. Outside, the storm continued, hour after hour. The camp became quiet. Only the sound of wind remained. Then something happened. At first, it was barely noticeable. A distant noise, almost lost beneath the storm. A low growl, then another, then another. A hunter, sleeping near the fire, opened his eyes. He listened carefully. The sound came again. Longer this time. More urgent. Not from inside the camp. From outside. The wolves. The hunter sat up immediately. Something about their voices felt different. These were not ordinary sounds. Not the occasional noises the wolves sometimes made while resting nearby. These growls carried urgency. Warning. Alarm. More wolves joined in. The sounds became louder. More intense. The hunter rose to his feet. Several others awoke as well. Around the edge of the camp, the wolves were moving. Not running away. Not fighting among themselves. Instead, they faced outward into the darkness. Every wolf stared toward the same direction, their bodies tense, their ears forward, their eyes fixed upon something hidden beyond the storm. Then came a sharp bark, followed by another and another. The entire camp woke up. Children stirred. Parents grabbed spears. Hunters rushed toward the fire. Even the elders sat upright. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The wolves continued barking, growling, pacing. They were no longer watching the camp. They were watching something approaching the camp. The realization sent a chill through everyone. The wolves had noticed a threat, and they had noticed it first. One of the hunters stepped closer to the edge of the firelight. Snow whipped against his face. The darkness beyond the camp was nearly impossible to see through. For several long moments, nothing appeared. Then, suddenly, movement. A massive shadow emerged from the storm, large, powerful, unmistakable. A cave bear. Even from a distance, its size was intimidating. The animal had likely been drawn by the scent of food, by the warmth of the fire, by desperation. Winter was starving everything, the bear included. Normally, such an encounter could be catastrophic, especially during a storm, especially at night. The tribe would have little warning, little time to react. But tonight was different, because the wolves had already sounded the alarm. The hunters moved quickly. Spears were gathered. Torches were lifted. People formed a defensive line around the camp. The bear hesitated. The fire burned brighter. The humans stood ready, and the wolves continued growling from the darkness. For several tense moments, nobody moved. The storm howled. The fire crackled. The bear watched. The wolves watched. The humans watched. Then slowly the enormous animal turned away. Its silhouette disappeared back into the snow. The danger had passed, at least for now. The camp remained silent. Nobody celebrated. Nobody cheered. Everyone simply stood there, processing what had happened, because something extraordinary had just occurred. Without the wolves, the tribe might never have known the bear was approaching. Without the wolves, people might have remained asleep. Without the wolves, the encounter could have unfolded very differently. The hunters looked toward the darkness, toward the animals they had spent weeks arguing about. The wolves had already settled down, their warning given, their job finished. The pale young wolf sat near its usual place, calm, quiet, watching the camp once again, as though nothing unusual had happened. The elder who had defended the wolves stared into the fire. Then he spoke softly. "So," the camp listened. "Perhaps they've been watching over us." No one laughed. No one dismissed the idea, because everyone had witnessed the same thing. For the first time, the tribe saw the wolves differently. Not merely as predators, not merely as rivals competing for food, but as eyes in the darkness, as ears that never stopped listening, as living alarms capable of detecting danger long before humans could. The debate around the campfire changed after that night. Not completely. Some hunters remained skeptical. Some still distrusted the wolves. But the balance had shifted. The wolves had earned something valuable, something difficult to gain. Trust, only a little, but enough to change the future. Because from that night forward, whenever the wolves appeared beyond the firelight, many people no longer saw a threat waiting in the darkness. They saw guardians, and before long, that growing trust would be tested by the harshest winter the tribe had ever faced. A winter so severe that the people would soon be forced to make an impossible choice. A choice involving their last remaining food, and the wolves who had become part of their lives. After the night of the cave bear, something changed. Not suddenly, not completely, but enough for everyone in the tribe to feel it. The arguments around the fire became quieter. The hunters who once wanted to drive the wolves away no longer spoke with the same certainty. The elders watched more carefully. The children smiled whenever the familiar shapes appeared beyond the firelight, and the wolves continued returning. Night after night, storm after storm, always there, always watching, as winter tightened its grip on the land. Yet while trust was slowly growing, another problem was growing faster. Hunger. The winter that followed became one of the hardest anyone could remember. The storms lasted longer. The temperatures dropped lower. The hunting parties traveled farther than ever before. And still they returned with less food. Some days they brought back a rabbit. Some days a fox. Some days nothing at all. The great reindeer herds seemed to have vanished from the world entirely. Weeks passed without a successful large hunt. For Ice Age people, that was terrifying. Large animals meant survival. Large animals meant fat, marrow, warm clothing, tools. Without them, every day became more difficult. The tribe began rationing food more carefully. Meals grew smaller, then smaller still. Children who once received extra portions no longer could. Even the strongest hunters felt the effects. Their faces became thinner, their movements slower. The energy that once filled the camp slowly faded. One evening, as snow drifted across the valley, the tribe gathered around the fire for dinner. The meal was silent, painfully silent. There was almost nothing to eat. A few strips of dried meat, several cracked bones saved for marrow, and a small amount of animal fat carefully divided among the families. That was all. The food supply had never looked so small. Everyone knew it. Nobody wanted to say it aloud, because speaking the truth would make it real. The tribe was running out of food, Completely. Across the fire, a young mother quietly handed part of her meal to her child. The child accepted it without complaint, without understanding how much sacrifice that simple gesture required. Nearby, one of the elders stared into the flames. He had survived many winters, but even he could not remember one quite like this. The wind howled outside the camp. Snow swept through the darkness, and beyond the firelight, the wolves appeared, as they always did, watching, waiting, hungry. For several moments, no one paid them much attention. Everyone had their own problems, their own empty stomachs, their own fears. Then a hunter spoke. His voice was tired. "We shouldn't feed them anymore." No one immediately responded. The statement hung in the air, heavy, uncomfortable, difficult to argue with. The hunter pointed toward the wolves. "They can hunt for themselves." Another nodded. "We barely have enough food for our own people." Again, no one disagreed. Because they were right. Every piece of meat mattered now. Every scrap, every bone, every bite. The tribe had reached the point where survival demanded difficult choices. And yet, something unexpected happened. No one moved to chase the wolves away. No one picked up stones. No one raised a spear. The camp simply sat in silence, looking toward the darkness, looking toward the familiar shapes that had shared the valley with them for months. Then the pale young wolf stepped forward. Not aggressively, not confidently. Slowly, carefully. The animal looked thinner than ever before. Its ribs showed beneath its winter coat. Its movements lacked the energy it once possessed. For the first time, everyone could clearly see the truth. The wolves were starving too. The same winter that threatened the tribe threatened them as well. The same storms, the same disappearing herds, the same hunger. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then, something remarkable happened. The same child who had thrown the first bone weeks earlier looked down at the small piece of meat in their hands. The portion was tiny, hardly enough for anyone. The child hesitated, then quietly stood up. The adults watched. The hunters watched. The elders watched. Without saying a word, the child walked to the edge of the firelight and placed a small piece of meat on the snow. Not much, just a single bite. Then stepped back. The wolves froze. The tribe froze. Even the wind seemed quieter. The pale young wolf stared at the food, then slowly approached. The animal picked up the meat, and for a moment something extraordinary happened. The wolf looked directly toward the camp, toward the people, toward the child. No growling, no fear, no threat. Only recognition, only trust. The moment lasted seconds, yet it felt much longer. The child returned to the fire. The wolf retreated into the darkness, and no one spoke, because everyone understood what had just happened. The tribe had chosen to share, not because it was practical, not because it guaranteed survival, not because anyone expected a reward. They shared because the wolves were no longer strangers. They had become part of the story of the camp, part of the long winter, part of daily life. The hunters exchanged uncertain glances. Some still disagreed. Some still believed it was foolish. But others found themselves thinking about the wolves differently. For months, the animals had remained nearby. For months, they had watched over the camp. For months, they had warned of danger. And now, as both species struggled through the harshest winter of their lives, neither seemed willing to abandon the other. The fire burned low. The wolves remained beyond the light. The snow continued falling. And somewhere deep inside the tribe, an idea began taking shape. Perhaps survival was not only about strength. Perhaps it was not only about hunting. or weapons, or endurance. Perhaps survival also depended on something else, something far older, something far more powerful. The willingness to trust, the willingness to cooperate, the willingness to share. Even when resources were scarce, even when fear was strong, even when logic suggested otherwise. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness create consequences far greater than anyone could imagine. And before this winter finally ended, the tribe would begin discovering just how valuable that kindness truly was. For the wolves had been receiving food from the humans. But very soon, the humans would discover what the wolves were giving back. The meat was gone, consumed in seconds, forgotten by morning. Or at least that is what most people would have assumed. After all, it had only been a small piece of food. A single bite shared during a difficult winter. Nothing more. Nothing less. Yet the days that followed began revealing something remarkable. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly, in the quiet way that history often unfolds. The storms continued across the frozen world. The snow remained deep. The hunting grounds remained unpredictable. And the tribe still faced the same challenge every morning, finding enough food to survive. The hunters left camp before sunrise, as they always did, wrapped in heavy animal furs, carrying stone-tipped spears, following tracks through valleys buried beneath snow. Most hunting trips began the same way. Hours of walking, hours of searching, hours of uncertainty. Success was never guaranteed. But something strange started happening. Several hunters noticed that the wolves often seemed to know things first. The animals would suddenly become alert, lifting their heads, testing the wind, listening, watching, sometimes long before any human noticed a sign of movement. At first, nobody thought much about it. Wolves were hunters. Of course, they were skilled at finding prey. But the pattern continued, again and again. One morning, a hunting party traveled deep into a frozen valley several miles from camp. The snow was fresh, no tracks, no signs of animals, nothing. Hours passed. The hunters considered turning back. Continuing would waste valuable energy. Returning empty-handed would mean another difficult night around the fire. Then, one hunter noticed something. The wolves. Several of the familiar wolves had followed from a distance, not close enough to interfere, not close enough to threaten, but close enough to observe. The pale young wolf was among them, the same wolf that had first accepted food beside the campfire. Suddenly, the wolves changed direction. Every head turned toward the eastern ridge. Every nose lifted into the wind. The animals moved with purpose. The hunters exchanged curious glances. Something had caught the wolves' attention. The humans followed, carefully, quietly. The climb was difficult. The snow was deep. The wind was fierce. But when they finally reached the ridge, they saw what the wolves had detected. A herd of reindeer, hundreds of them, moving slowly across a distant valley. The hunters froze. The animals were far away, almost impossible to see from below. No human eye had spotted them, yet the wolves somehow knew they were there. For the first time, the hunters began realizing something important. The wolves were not merely surviving alongside them, they were helping them see the world differently, helping them notice opportunities that might otherwise be missed. The hunt that followed provided enough food for many days. The tribe celebrated that night. The children ate until their stomachs felt full. The elders smiled more than usual, and beyond the firelight, the wolves appeared once again, watching quietly, as always. But now some people viewed them differently. not simply as animals, not simply as predators, but as valuable companions in an increasingly difficult world. Weeks later, another event strengthened that belief. The hunting party had traveled far from camp, much farther than normal. The weather seemed calm when they left, but weather in the Ice Age could change quickly, without warning. By midday, dark clouds gathered. The wind shifted. A storm approached. The hunters needed to return immediately. The problem was that visibility was already deteriorating. Landmarks vanished. Tracks disappeared. The familiar landscape transformed into a maze of snow and wind. Getting lost was a real possibility, and getting lost could mean it. The hunters pressed forward, trying to stay together, trying to find their way home. Then, one of them noticed movement ahead. The wolves. The same group that often lingered near camp. They moved steadily across the snow, not running, not hunting, simply traveling, toward the valley where the tribe lived, toward home. The hunters followed. Hours later, through swirling snow, they saw something they feared they might never see again. The distant glow of their campfire. The wolves had unknowingly guided them back. Another coincidence, perhaps. Yet the tribe was beginning to accumulate many coincidences, too many to ignore. As winter continued, another benefit became impossible to overlook. The nights. For generations, darkness had belonged to predators. Humans depended on fire for protection. Without it, the night could become dangerous very quickly. But now, many evenings felt different. The wolves often rested near the camp, not inside the circle of people, not close enough to be considered tame, but near enough. Close enough to hear, close enough to smell, close enough to react. Several times, strange sounds echoed across the valley during the night. The distant growl of a predator, the movement of an unfamiliar animal. Each time the wolves responded first. Heads lifted, bodies stiffened. Low warning growls emerged from the darkness, long before the humans detected anything unusual. The wolves became living alarms, not intentionally, not because they were trained, simply because their senses were sharper, their hearing keener, their awareness more constant. For the first time, many people slept more easily. Not completely. This was still the Ice Age. Danger never disappeared. But knowing the wolves were nearby brought a strange sense of comfort. The animals that once inspired fear now provided reassurance. And with each passing week, the connection between the two species grew stronger. One evening, the elder who had first noticed the wolves' unusual behavior sat beside the fire and watched them resting in the darkness. Children laughed nearby, families shared food. The camp felt warmer than it had in months. The elder smiled, then quietly spoke to one of the hunters. "Do you remember when we argued about feeding them?" The hunter nodded. The elder gestured toward the wolves. "We thought we were giving something away." The hunter followed his gaze. Beyond the firelight, the pale wolf lifted its head, watching the camp as it always did. The elder smiled again. "But perhaps we were receiving something too." The hunter did not answer immediately, because deep down, he knew the elder was right. The tribe had shared scraps of meat, small sacrifices made during desperate times. Yet in return, they had gained something far more valuable. Extra eyes, extra ears, additional hunters, additional protectors, additional survivors facing the same frozen world. The wolves had not taken from the tribe. They had strengthened it, and neither side fully understood it yet. But a partnership was beginning to form, one that would eventually spread across continents, one that would outlast empires, one that would survive for thousands of years. All because during one harsh Ice Age winter, a few hungry humans chose to share, and a few unusual wolves chose to stay. Winter eventually ended. Not all at once. Not with a sudden burst of warmth, but gradually, almost imperceptibly. The storms became less frequent. The days grew slightly longer. The frozen valleys began showing small signs of life once again. For the tribe, the return of spring brought relief. The reindeer herd slowly reappeared. Plants emerged from beneath melting snow. The constant fear of starvation loosened its grip. Life became a little easier. Yet something else had changed during that long winter. Something far more important than anyone realized. The wolves were still there. Most people expected them to disappear. That would have been the natural outcome. The winter was over. Food was becoming easier to find. The need that had drawn both species together was fading. Surely the wolves would return to the wild. Surely the strange relationship would end. But it didn't. Night after night, several wolves continued returning to the camp. Not all of them. Only a few. The same familiar faces. The pale young wolf. The older gray male. Several others that had spent the winter near the tribe. They no longer seemed like visitors. The children recognized them instantly. The adults recognized them too. The wolves had become part of daily life. Not family. Not companions. Not yet. But something more than strangers. The months passed. Then years. Children grew taller. Hunters grew older. Elders passed away, and new leaders emerged. The tribe continued moving across the landscape following the rhythms of the Ice Age world. And somehow, certain wolves kept appearing, always nearby, always watching, always choosing to remain close to humans. The decision was unusual. Most wolves still avoided people. Most remained cautious. Most vanished the moment they detected human presence. But not these wolves. Something about them was different. The tribe noticed it. The wolves themselves likely did not. Generation after generation, the calmest wolves stayed closest to the camp. The most aggressive wolves kept their distance. The most fearful wolves disappeared into the wilderness. Over time, this simple pattern began creating changes. Small changes at first, almost impossible to see. A wolf that tolerated humans slightly better. A wolf that showed less fear around campfires. A wolf that remained calm around children. Tiny differences. Yet nature often works through tiny differences. The years continued passing. One spring, several wolf pups appeared near the tribe's camp. The sight caused excitement among the children. The pups were curious. Far more curious than the adult wolves. Everything fascinated them. The sounds of people, the smell of smoke, the movement of children running through camp. The pups observed it all with wide eyes. And something remarkable happened. They grew up seeing humans as a normal part of the world, not as enemies, not as threats, simply as another presence within their environment. The children grew up alongside them, both species learning about one another from the very beginning of life. The elders began noticing changes. The young wolves were calmer than previous generations, less nervous, less likely to flee, more willing to remain nearby. The difference was subtle, yet it was becoming impossible to ignore. One evening, many years after the first bone had been tossed into the snow, a hunter sat beside the fire, watching several young wolves resting near camp. One of them slept peacefully, completely unconcerned by the nearby humans. The hunter shook his head in disbelief. He remembered the early days. He remembered when every wolf vanished at the slightest movement. He remembered the fear, the uncertainty, the endless arguments around the fire. Now those memories felt distant. The wolves had changed, and so had the people. Trust had grown slowly, so slowly that no one noticed it happening, until one day it simply existed. The relationship continued evolving. The younger wolves followed hunting parties more frequently. The younger humans spent more time observing them. Each generation inherited a little more familiarity than the generation before. The divide between the two species grew smaller, not because anyone planned it, not because anyone understood it, but because both sides kept choosing proximity over distance, again and again, year after year, generation after generation. Then came a moment that some later storytellers would remember. A child sat near the edge of camp one afternoon. Nearby, a young wolf rested in the grass. The child stood and walked toward it. Several adults immediately became alert. Old instincts remained powerful. The memory of wild predators never disappeared completely. But the wolf did not growl. It did not run. It simply watched. The child stopped a few feet away. The wolf remained calm. The two stared at one another for several seconds. Then the child sat down. And so did the wolf. Nothing dramatic happened. No grand event. No magical transformation. Yet somehow that simple image captured everything that had changed. Thousands of years earlier, such a moment would have been impossible. Now it felt almost ordinary. The tribe no longer viewed these animals in the same way. The wolves no longer viewed humans in the same way. Something new was emerging, something the world had never seen before. The animals were no longer fully wild wolves, yet they were not dogs either. Not the dogs we know today, not companions sleeping beside fireplaces, not animals wearing collars, not pets. They existed somewhere in between. A new path had begun. One unlike anything nature had produced before. The transformation remained incomplete, but the direction was clear. Every generation moved slightly further from the old relationship between predator and rival, and slightly closer to something entirely different. A partnership, a friendship, a shared future. The tribe could not see the centuries ahead. They could not imagine farms, cities, kingdoms, civilizations. They could not imagine dogs sleeping beside children's beds or running through suburban parks thousands of years later. But they had already taken the first step. Without realizing it, they were helping create the first idos, not through force, not through domination, not through conquest, but through patience, trust, and countless small acts repeated across generations. The same fire, the same valley, the same familiar eyes watching from the edge of the light. Only now those eyes no longer belonged entirely to the wild. And before long, the greatest beneficiaries of this rowing friendship would not be the hunters or the elders, but the children, the youngest members of the tribe, the ones whose chances of survival were about to improve in ways nobody could yet understand. For countless generations, survival in the Ice Age had always been uncertain. Every winter demanded sacrifices. Every storm tested the limits of endurance. Every season brought difficult choices. And among all members of the tribe, no one faced greater risk than the children. The adults understood this better than anyone. Hunters were strong, experienced, adaptable. Elders possessed wisdom and knowledge. But children were different. Their bodies were smaller. Their strength was limited. Their chances of surviving a harsh winter often depended upon the people around them. A successful hunt could mean the difference between life and death. A failed hunting season could change the future of an entire generation. For thousands of years, this had been the reality of human life. Then, little by little, something began to change. At first, nobody noticed. The change was too gradual, too subtle, too deeply woven into everyday life. The tribe simply continued doing what it had always done. They hunted. They traveled. They followed migrating herds. They raised children beside campfires beneath vast Ice Age skies. And the animals that were becoming dogs continued accompanying them. Year after year, generation after generation, always nearby, always watching, always learning. The relationship between humans and these early dogs had grown stronger than ever before. The animals no longer lingered only at the edges of camp. Many now traveled alongside hunting parties. Others remained near the children. Some slept close enough to hear every sound within the camp. The partnership was becoming part of daily life, and gradually its benefits became impossible to ignore. One autumn evening, a hunting group prepared to leave before sunrise. Winter was approaching once again. Food needed to be gathered. The tribe would require enough supplies to survive the months ahead. Several young dogs accompanied the hunters. No one ordered them to come. No one trained them. They simply followed, as they often did. Hours later, deep within a valley, one of the dogs suddenly became alert. Its ears lifted. Its nose tested the wind. Then it moved ahead of the group. The hunters followed. Soon, they discovered a herd of reindeer grazing beyond a ridge. The animals had remained hidden from human sight. Yet the dogs had detected them first. The hunt was successful. The tribe received food. Children ate well that night. The event seemed ordinary. But similar moments began happening again and again. The dogs found tracks. The dogs noticed movement. The dogs sensed opportunities. And each successful hunt meant more food reaching the camp, more food reaching families, more food reaching children. As the years passed, the effects accumulated. One successful hunt became 10. 10 became hundreds. Hundreds became generations. The impact spread through the tribe like ripples across water. Meanwhile, another benefit emerged after sunset. The nights. For most of human history, darkness had been dangerous. Predators moved unseen. Threats approached silently. A sleeping tribe was vulnerable, especially during winter, especially during storms. But the dogs remained alert, even while resting, even while sleeping. Their senses continued working. Many nights they detected danger long before any human noticed. A strange sound beyond the camp, an unfamiliar scent carried by the wind, movement in the darkness. The dogs reacted immediately. A low growl, a sharp bark, a sudden alertness. Often that was enough. The tribe awoke. The hunters prepared. Potential danger passed without incident. Again and again, disasters were avoided before they could begin. Parents slept a little easier. Children slept more safely. The camp became more secure, not because danger disappeared, but because warning arrived sooner. One winter, a severe storm trapped the tribe in a valley for several days. Food was limited. Conditions were difficult. The wind howled without rest. Many families worried about the youngest children. Yet during those difficult nights, the dogs remained close, curled beside shelters, resting near families, sharing warmth, sharing companionship. Their presence brought comfort during uncertain times, perhaps more comfort than anyone realized. Children who grew up alongside these animals rarely remembered a world without them. To them, the dogs had always been there, always part of the camp, always part of the family. One little girl might fall asleep listening to distant wolves howling beyond the valley, while a familiar dog rested nearby. One young boy might learn to recognize animal tracks by watching the dogs investigate them. Another child might spend afternoons playing beside a young dog born during the same season. The bond deepened with every generation, not through dramatic events, not through great historical moments, but through thousands of ordinary days shared together. And those ordinary days produced extraordinary results. Over time, tribes with dogs gained advantages, small advantages, but survival often depends upon small advantages. A slightly better hunt, a slightly earlier warning, a slightly safer camp, a slightly warmer night. Individually, each benefit seemed modest. Together, they became powerful. Children survived winters that might once have claimed them. Families endured difficult seasons that might once have broken them. Entire groups became more resilient, more adaptable, more capable of thriving in a challenging world. The elders noticed. The hunters noticed. Even neighboring tribes began noticing. Some wondered why certain groups consistently seemed to find more game, why certain camps appeared safer, why certain families managed to survive harsh years more successfully than others. The answer often rested quietly beside the fire, watching, listening, waiting, the descendants of wolves that had once stood beyond the firelight. One evening, many years after the first scraps of food had been shared, an elderly hunter sat beside the campfire, observing the children. Several were laughing together. A young dog chased them playfully around the camp. The scene felt peaceful, ordinary. Yet the hunter remembered a different world, a world before the wolves stayed, a world before trust began growing between the two species, a world where survival felt even more uncertain. The hunter smiled, because he understood something important. The greatest gift these animals had given the tribe was not better hunting, not better protection, not even greater security. It was opportunity, the opportunity for more children to grow up, more children to become hunters, more children to become parents, more children to carry the tribe into the future, generation after generation. The dogs helped protect something far more valuable than food. They helped protect tomorrow. And as those children grew older and traveled beyond the lands of their ancestors, they would carry that ancient friendship with them, across rivers, across mountains, across frozen plains, into entirely new worlds waiting beyond the horizon. Together, as they always had, as they always would. The children survived. They grew older. They became hunters, parents, storytellers, leaders. And when the time came to leave familiar lands behind, they carried more than their tools and memories with them. They carried the dogs. By now, the partnership that had begun beside a lonely Ice Age campfire was no longer a curious experiment. It had become part of life itself. Entire generations had grown up alongside these animals. Children trusted them. Hunters relied upon them. Families welcomed them near the fire. The bond between the two species had become stronger than anyone could have imagined during those first hungry winters. And soon that bond would begin a journey unlike anything the world had ever seen. A journey across continents, across climates, across entire worlds. Together. The Ice Age was changing. Slowly, almost invisibly. The massive glaciers that had dominated the northern hemisphere for thousands of years were beginning to retreat. Rivers shifted. Forests expanded. Grasslands changed. Animal migration routes evolved. The world was transforming, and humans adapted as they always had. When the land changed, they moved. When the herds moved, they followed. Movement was survival. For prehistoric people, staying in one place for too long could be dangerous. Resources disappeared. Seasons changed. New opportunities appeared elsewhere. And so, Generation after generation, human groups spread farther and farther across the planet. Some traveled west into Europe. Others journeyed east toward the endless lands of Siberia. Still others followed routes that no one had ever traveled before, routes leading toward unknown horizons. And wherever humans went, dogs increasingly went too. At first, the journeys were difficult. Traveling through Ice Age landscapes was never easy. The distances were enormous, the weather unpredictable, the terrain unforgiving. Families crossed frozen valleys, climbed mountain passes, navigated vast grasslands stretching beyond sight. Every migration required courage. Every migration involved risk. Yet the dogs remained, walking beside the people, sleeping beside the people, facing the same storms, the same cold, the same uncertainty. One evening after a long day of travel, a small group settled beside a river. Children gathered wood. Hunters prepared food. Dogs rested nearby. The scene felt familiar, almost identical to thousands of other evenings. Yet something remarkable had happened. Hundreds of miles separated this camp from the place where their ancestors had once shared those first scraps with curious wolves. The friendship was traveling, spreading, growing, one camp at a time, one generation at a time. As humans expanded into new regions, the dogs adapted with them. In the forests of Europe, they learned to navigate dense woodlands. Across the open plains, they helped track migrating animals. In colder northern territories, they endured temperatures that pushed survival to its limits. The relationship continued evolving. Not because humans ordered it to, not because dogs were forced into it, but because both species benefited from remaining together. The partnership worked, and successful partnerships tend to survive. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. The descendants of those early dogs became increasingly common among human groups. Some tribes traveled without them. Many did not. Those that lived alongside dogs often discovered advantages that others lacked. Additional eyes, additional ears, additional hunters, additional companions. By now, the dogs had become something more than useful animals. They had become part of human society, part of family life, part of survival itself. Then came one of the most extraordinary migrations in human history, a journey that would eventually change the future of an entire continent. The world looked very different during the Ice Age. Sea levels were lower than they are today. Vast amounts of Earth's water remained trapped inside enormous glaciers. As a result, land connected regions that are now separated by oceans. One such region stretched between Siberia and North America. Today, that area lies beneath the waters of the Bering Strait. But thousands of years ago, it formed a broad land bridge connecting two worlds, a pathway into the unknown. The people standing there could not know what awaited them beyond the horizon. They had no maps, no written records, no understanding that an entirely new continent lay ahead. They simply followed opportunity, followed the herds, followed survival, and beside them walked dogs. Imagine that journey. Frozen winds sweeping across endless plains, families carrying everything they own, children walking beside parents, dogs trotting through the snow. Together they crossed into lands no human group had ever explored before. New rivers, new forests, new mountains, new animals, everything unfamiliar, everything waiting to be discovered. And through it all, the dogs remained part of the journey. Generation after generation, camp after camp, mile after mile. As human populations spread across North America, dogs spread with them. The partnership that began beside a campfire in the Ice Age was now crossing an entire hemisphere. The scale of the story had become enormous. What started as a few wolves watching from beyond the firelight had evolved into something much larger, a global relationship, a shared history spanning continents, a friendship expanding alongside humanity itself. Back in those early days, no one could have imagined such an outcome. The child who tossed the first bone could never have envisioned dogs traveling across Europe, across Siberia, across North America. They could never have imagined future generations building entire lives alongside these animals. Yet that is exactly what happened. Because history is often shaped by simple choices, a small act repeated enough times can eventually transform the world. And now, thousands of years after those first scraps were shared, humans and dogs were no longer merely surviving together. They were exploring the world together, building the future together, writing a story that stretched from one end of the earth to the other. And astonishingly, that story was still only beginning. For the greatest impact of this partnership would not be measured in miles traveled or continents crossed. It would be measured in something far more important: the success of an entire species. A partnership so powerful that it would eventually become one of the most successful relationships in the history of life on Earth. And that is exactly where our story goes next. By now, thousands of years have passed since that first winter. The child who tossed the bone is long gone. The hunters who argued around the fire are gone. The elders who first noticed the unusual wolves are gone. Even the valleys they once called home have changed. Glaciers have retreated. Forests have expanded. Rivers have shifted their courses. The world itself looks different. Yet one thing remains. Humans and dogs are still together. The partnership survived. And not only did it survive, it flourished. As human groups spread across continents, dogs spread alongside them. Across Europe, across Asia, across the Arctic, across North America. Wherever people traveled, dogs increasingly followed. At first glance, this may not seem unusual. After all, humans eventually formed relationships with many animals: horses, cattle, sheep, goats, chickens. But there is something important that makes dogs different from all of them. Dogs came first, long before farms existed, long before cities appeared, long before people planted crops, long before civilization itself. There were dogs. That simple fact makes their story unique. The first animal to truly join humanity's journey was not the horse. It was not the cow. It was not the sheep. It was the dog. And the timing could not have been more important, because humans were still vulnerable, still struggling, still living at the mercy of weather predators and migration patterns. Civilization had not arrived to make life easier. There were no walls, no roads, no permanent settlements, no stored harvests waiting for winter. Only people, the land, and the daily challenge of survival. In that uncertain world, dogs became something no other animal had ever become. Partners, not livestock, not possessions. Partners. The distinction matters. Most animals entered human life because they provided a resource. Cattle provided meat. Sheep provided wool. Goats provided milk. Horses provided transportation. But dogs offered something less tangible, something harder to measure. They offered cooperation. The relationship worked both ways. Humans benefited. Dogs benefited. Both species became stronger together than they could have been alone. This is one reason the partnership lasted, and why it spread so successfully. Imagine a typical Ice Age camp. The hunters leave before dawn. Dogs accompany them. The animals notice scents humans cannot detect. They hear sounds humans cannot hear. They recognize subtle movements in the landscape. Together, the group becomes more effective. Later that evening, the camp settles down for the night. The fire burns low. Children drift to sleep. Darkness surrounds the valley, but the dogs remain alert, listening, watching, sensing. Again, the partnership provides advantages, not dramatic advantages, not magical advantages, small advantages, the kind that matter most in survival. And survival is often a game of small margins. One extra warning, one successful hunt, one avoided danger, one protected child. Repeat those advantages across hundreds of years, across thousands of camps, across countless generations. The results become enormous. In fact, some scientists today believe that the relationship between humans and dogs may have influenced the success of human populations as they expanded across the world. Not because dogs solved every problem, but because they consistently made survival a little easier, a little safer, a little more successful. And sometimes, a little is all evolution needs. One evening, many generations after the first wolves approached human camps, a group of travelers rested beside a river. Their dogs lay nearby. Children played in the fading sunlight. The scene felt ordinary. Nothing remarkable seemed to be happening. Yet if someone could have stepped outside that moment and viewed it from the perspective of history, they would have seen something extraordinary. Two species, living together, traveling together, trusting one another. Not for a season, not for a lifetime, but for thousands of years. Few relationships in nature endure that long. Fewer still become stronger over time. The partnership continued evolving. Humans changed. Dogs changed. Each influenced the other. Dogs became more attentive to human gestures, more responsive to human emotions, more comfortable living within human communities. Meanwhile, humans became increasingly accustomed to life with dogs. A camp without dogs began to feel incomplete. A journey without dogs felt unusual. The two species adapted to one another in ways neither could fully understand. Perhaps that is what makes this story so remarkable. Neither side planned it. No human sat down one day and decided to create dogs. No wolf woke up and decided to become humanity's companion. The partnership emerged naturally, slowly, patiently, over generations, built from countless small interactions, a shared campfire, a shared hunt, a shared journey, a shared winter, and ultimately, a shared future. Today, people often think of major historical achievements as grand events: the invention of agriculture, the rise of cities, the construction of monuments, the creation of writing. All of those developments changed human history. But before any of them happened, another transformation had already taken place. Humans had found their first true animal partner. And that partner was the dog. The impact of that relationship cannot be measured only by survival rates or hunting success. Its influence runs deeper. Dogs became companions, guardians, travelers, helpers, friends. Something entirely new in the history of life. A different species choosing to share its future with ours. By now, the partnership seemed permanent, timeless, almost inevitable. Yet it was not inevitable at all. History could have unfolded differently. The wolves could have remained distant. The trust could have failed. The relationship could have ended before it ever truly began. And that raises a fascinating question, one that becomes harder to ignore the longer you think about it. What if those first humans had never shared food with the wolves? What if the friendship had never happened? What if dogs had never become part of the human story? The answer may reveal just how important this partnership truly was, and it may force us to reconsider everything we think we know about humanity's journey through history. For thousands of years, the partnership grew. One generation inherited it from the previous one. Children grew up beside dogs. Hunters relied on them. Families trusted them. Entire communities came to view them as a natural part of life. Eventually, the relationship became so familiar that people stopped questioning it. Dogs simply existed. They were always there. Beside the fire, beside the hunt, beside the family, beside humanity itself. But now for a moment, imagine something different. Imagine that none of it ever happened. Imagine returning to that frozen valley during the Ice Age. The snow still falls. The wind still howls. The reindeer still migrate across the distant plains. The hungry wolves still watch from beyond the firelight. But this time, the child never throws the bone. The tribe never shares its scraps. The wolves never stay. The friendship never begins. What happens next? At first, the answer seems simple. Probably nothing. After all, human beings survived before dogs existed. Surely they could continue surviving without them. And in some places, they probably could. But history is rarely shaped by dramatic differences. More often, it is shaped by small advantages repeated over thousands of years. Remove enough small advantages, and the future begins to change. Imagine the hunters leaving camp at sunrise. No dogs accompany them. No extra noses test the wind. No extra ears listen for movement beyond the hills. No additional eyes scan the landscape. The hunters still search, still work, still survive. But perhaps they miss opportunities they would otherwise have found. Perhaps a distant herd remains hidden. Perhaps a trail goes unnoticed. Perhaps a successful hunt becomes an unsuccessful one. One missed hunt may not matter. 10 missed hunts might. 100 certainly would. Now, imagine the nights. The fire burns low. Children sleep. The tribe rests after a long day. Beyond the camp, something moves in this darkness. Without dogs, no warning comes. No growl, no bark, no alert ears, detecting danger before humans can. Most nights pass peacefully, but not every night. Some dangers arrive unseen. Some threats come too close, and occasionally the cost is paid by the most vulnerable members of the tribe, the children. Because children have always lived closest to the edge of survival, even a small increase in risk matters. Even a small increase in safety matters. Now, imagine a particularly difficult winter. Food is scarce. The weather is brutal. Families struggle to survive. Without dogs helping locate game. Without dogs helping protect camp. Without dogs providing early warnings. Life becomes slightly harder. Only slightly. But survival is often decided by slight differences. Perhaps one family gathers less food. Perhaps one child enters winter weaker. Perhaps one hunting expedition fails. Again, and again, and again. The consequences accumulate. Not immediately, but gradually. Generation after generation. Imagine 2 neighboring tribes living through the same ice age. One group lives alongside dogs. The other does not. At first, they appear nearly identical. Both hunt. Both travel. Both endure the same winters. Yet over centuries, small differences emerge. The tribe with dogs experiences slightly more successful hunts, slightly safer nights, slightly better survival rates among children. The differences are modest, Yet those modest differences continue, adding up. One generation becomes two, two become 10, 10 become hundreds. The advantages compound, and eventually the gap becomes significant. More children survive, more families remain intact, more knowledge passes from elders to the next generation. More people are available to explore new territories. More opportunities emerge. This is one reason historians and scientists find the human-dog partnership so fascinating. Not because dogs performed miracles, not because they single-handedly saved humanity, but because they consistently improved the odds. And in evolutionary history, improved odds can change everything. Think about the migrations we discussed earlier, the journeys across Europe, across Siberia, across the frozen lands leading into North America. Those journeys were dangerous. Every migration carried risks. Every expedition faced uncertainty. Success depended on countless factors: weather, food, health, knowledge, cooperation. Dogs contributed to many of those factors. Take them away, and some migrations become harder. Some journeys take longer. Some groups turn back. Some never arrive at all. The map of human history might look slightly different. Perhaps entire communities disappear. Perhaps certain regions are settled later. Perhaps some groups simply fail to survive the journey. The changes would not be dramatic enough to notice immediately, but they would ripple outward through time, like stones dropped into a lake. One ripple becomes many, and many ripples eventually reshape the shoreline. Now think about the children once more. The children who grew up with dogs sleeping nearby, the children protected by early warnings, the children who benefited from successful hunts, the children who survived because their families survived. Many of those children would one day become parents themselves, then grandparents, then ancestors. Their descendants would spread across continents, build villages, create cities, develop civilizations. Every additional child who survived carried the future forward. Every life mattered, and dogs quietly influenced more of those lives than most people realize. This is why the story of those first wolves matters. Not because one meal changed the world overnight. Not because one act of kindness instantly transformed history, but because that act began a chain reaction. A relationship that lasted thousands of years. A partnership that grew stronger with time. A partnership so successful that it eventually spread across nearly every corner of the planet. The more you think about it, the more extraordinary it becomes. A hungry child shares a scrap of food. A curious wolf chooses to stay. Neither understands the significance of the moment. Neither can see the future. Yet together they begin shaping it. And perhaps that is the most remarkable part of all. History often celebrates kings, empires, battles, inventions. But some of the most important turning points happen quietly, beside a fire, during a cold winter, between two living creatures trying to survive. And when you look back across thousands of years, it becomes increasingly difficult to imagine human history without dogs. Which brings us to the final chapter of our journey. A chapter that reveals why this friendship endured when so many others faded away. A chapter about the animal that stayed. The world never stopped changing. The glaciers that once dominated the northern lands eventually retreated. The vast Ice Age plains transformed. Forests spread, rivers shifted, entire landscapes disappeared, while new ones emerged. Generation after generation, humanity adapted, as it always had. The hunters who once followed reindeer across frozen valleys became something new. Some groups began settling near rivers. Others learned to plant seeds. Others discovered that certain animals could be raised instead of hunted. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the age of wandering began giving way to the age of settlement. Villages appeared, then larger villages, then towns, and eventually the first cities. Human history entered an entirely new chapter. Yet through all of these changes, one familiar figure remained: the dog. Thousands of years earlier, dogs had rested beside temporary campfires surrounded by snow. Now they rested beside homes made from wood stone and mud brick. The surroundings had changed. The partnership had not. As agriculture spread across different regions of the world, human life became more complex. Families stored food. Communities grew larger. Trade routes connected distant settlements. The pace of change accelerated. But dogs adapted right alongside humanity. In farming villages, they guarded food supplies. They protected livestock. They alerted families to danger during the night. In growing settlements, they became trusted companions, useful helpers, faithful guardians. And once again, they improved the odds, just as they had done during the Ice Age. The centuries continued passing. The first civilizations appeared. Along great rivers, people built impressive cities. They constructed walls, temples, roads, markets, governments. The world became increasingly sophisticated. Yet if you looked carefully at daily life, you would still find dogs, resting in the shade of buildings, following travelers along dusty roads, sleeping near families after sunset, watching over children, waiting patiently beside their human companions. Empires rose, empires fell, dogs remained. Kingdoms expanded across continents. Dogs remained. New technologies transformed human society. Dogs remained. The relationship endured because it had become woven into the fabric of human life itself. Many animals entered human history. Some provided food. Others provided labor. Others provided materials. But dogs occupied a unique place. They were not merely useful. They were present. Present during ordinary moments. Present during difficult moments. Present during celebrations. Present during hardships. Present when families grew. Present when families mourned. Again and again, through thousands of years of history, dogs stayed close to people, and people welcomed them. One generation passed this relationship to the next. Children who grew up with dogs often became adults who raised dogs. The cycle continued. Century after century, the bond deepened. As human societies became more advanced, dogs evolved alongside them. Different environments created different needs. Some dogs became skilled hunters. Some became herders. Some became guardians. Some became companions. The diversity increased. Yet beneath those differences remained the same ancient connection: trust. The same trust that first began forming beside an Ice Age fire. The same trust that had once seemed impossible. Imagine traveling through history, standing beside an ancient hunter watching wolves beyond the firelight, then moving forward thousands of years, watching farmers harvest crops, dogs nearby, moving forward again, watching merchants travel distant roads, dogs nearby, moving forward again, watching families gather inside homes, dogs nearby. The details change. The centuries pass. Civilizations come and go. Yet the dogs remain, almost like a thread running through the entire story of humanity. a thread connecting the modern world to a forgotten winter long ago. Sometimes history feels distant, ancient, difficult to imagine. The Ice Age seems separated from us by an impossible amount of time. The people who lived then feel almost like strangers, yet there is something that connects their world to ours, something familiar, something many people can see every day. The dog. A modern dog, sleeping peacefully on a living room floor, carries a history stretching back tens of thousands of years. Its story did not begin in a city. It did not begin on a farm. It did not begin in a house. It began beside a campfire, in a frozen world, during a winter when survival was uncertain, when hungry humans and curious wolves first began noticing one another. And perhaps that is why the relationship endured, because it was never built solely on usefulness. Usefulness helps relationships begin, but it rarely helps them survive for thousands of years. Something deeper was involved: shared experiences, shared challenges, shared survival. Over time, dogs became more than hunting partners, more than guards, more than helpers. They became companions, perhaps humanity's first true animal companions. That distinction matters, because companionship changes the nature of a relationship. A hunter may value a spear, a farmer may value a tool, but people do not grieve for tools. People do not form emotional bonds with tools. The connection between humans and dogs became something different, something personal, something emotional, something capable of surviving enormous changes in human society. And that is why, after all these thousands of years, dogs remained when so many other relationships faded. They stayed through the rise of agriculture, through the birth of civilization, through the growth of cities, through the rise and fall of empires, through every major chapter of human history. They stayed. From the first campfires of the Ice Age to the modern homes of today. And as our story approaches its end, we return to the question that began this journey. Why would starving humans share their last scraps of food with wolves? The answer, it turns out, is much larger than survival, much larger than hunting, much larger than history itself, because that simple act of kindness created something rare, a friendship that endured, a friendship that crossed continents, a friendship that crossed millennia, a friendship that is still with us tonight. And in our final chapter, we will look back across the entire journey and understand why that friendship may be one of the most successful partnerships in the history of life on Earth. And so after thousands of years, we find ourselves back where this story began. Not in a city, not in a kingdom, not in a civilization, but beside a fire. A small fire burning against the darkness of the Ice Age. The wind is cold. The snow drifts across the frozen valley. The hunting grounds have been difficult. Food is running low. Children are asleep beneath layers of animal hides. The elders sit quietly near the fading warmth. The hunters stare into the flames, wondering what tomorrow will bring. It is a scene that has played out countless times throughout human history, and beyond the edge of the firelight, a wolf is waiting, hungry, patient, watching. At that moment, nobody around the camp understands what the future holds. They cannot imagine farms. They cannot imagine cities. They cannot imagine roads, nations, or civilizations. They cannot imagine the millions of homes that will someday exist across the world. And they certainly cannot imagine that thousands of years later, dogs will be sleeping beside human families on nearly every continent on Earth. All they know is this moment, this night, this winter, this struggle to survive. And yet within that ordinary moment, a remarkable decision is made. Someone chooses to share, not because it is easy, not because it is logical, not because survival is guaranteed, but because something has begun to change. A predator is no longer viewed only as a threat. A hungry animal is no longer viewed only as competition. For the first time, perhaps two species begin seeing one another differently, not as enemies, not as rivals, but as fellow survivors facing the same unforgiving world. That decision seems small, almost insignificant, a scrap of meat, a tossed bone, a moment beside a campfire. Yet history is often shaped by moments exactly like these. Quiet moments, ordinary moments, moments nobody realizes are important until thousands of years later, because that small act of trust did not end when the wolf walked away. It continued across generations, across continents, across entire eras of human history. Together, humans and dogs crossed frozen plains. Together they explored new lands. Together they survived storms, migrations, famines, and changing climates. Together they witnessed the rise of agriculture, the birth of cities, the growth of civilizations, the rise and fall of empires. And through every chapter, one thing remained surprisingly constant. The dog stayed, long after the Ice Age ended, long after the wolves disappeared into history, long after the campfires became homes. The dog stayed. Perhaps that is why this story feels so meaningful, because it reminds us that history is not only shaped by great leaders, famous battles, or monumental discoveries. Sometimes, history is shaped by kindness, by trust, by relationships, by simple choices made between living creatures trying to survive. Tonight, somewhere nearby, a dog may be sleeping peacefully, perhaps curled up on a blanket, perhaps stretched out across a living room floor, perhaps resting at the foot of someone's bed, completely unaware that its story began tens of thousands of years ago, beside an Ice Age fire, with a hungry tribe, a hungry wolf, and a small piece of food shared in the darkness. No one living in that frozen valley could have known what would follow. No one could have predicted that their decision would help create one of the longest and most successful partnerships in the history of life on Earth. Yet somehow, it did. And perhaps that is the most extraordinary part of all. The friendship that changed the future of both species didn't begin with power. It didn't begin with conquest. It didn't begin with control. It began with trust. One winter night, one campfire, one wolf, and one small act of kindness. As the fire slowly fades and the stars drift overhead, the valley grows quiet once more. The wolf remains beyond the light. The people settle in for the night. Neither side knows that history is about to change. But we do. And thousands of years later, the story continues. Still unfolding. Still alive. Every time a dog looks up at a human. And every time a human looks back. Good night.